Today I wanted to talk about suggestivity and auto-suggestivity of the mind. The idea to talk about this particular subject. Well, first of all, I'm very interested in the mind and a lot about the book that I wrote is really focused on the mind. Well, largely because it's probably the mind is what I struggled the most in my life. I've always been seeking to understand my mind more, to understand not necessarily how to control it, but how to use it, and not be, well, quote unquote, bothered by it. I've always been intrigued by that saying that the mind can be a blessing but also a curse, and I definitely felt that curse aspect in the when at the beginning of my life in childhood and adolescence. So my mind has been auto-reflecting a lot about itself, and then my higher mind came starting to peek through and gave me some help with that, about the eye looking back at itself, which is pretty difficult to do. And more recently, I was quite riveted by that, by one of the Joe Rogan's latest podcasts with Chase Hughes, who's all about understanding mind control, external mind control, and understanding how malleable the mind is, and various techniques that can be used to change someone's mind, for lack of a better word, change someone's perspective, change someone's opinion, change someone's beliefs, and make them act in a way that you want them to act. And these techniques can be used for good and for bad, right? For bad, in that podcast that I'll link back in the description box. Well, they talk about people that recruit individuals to cults. So how can you make someone sign up to a cult? Obviously it's not a beneficial thing to do. So how can you convince people? And part of the trick is also to identify, who seems suggestible, and what techniques can I apply with one particular person to make them change their mind, and make them sign up for something that's probably not in their best interest. And obviously, in that podcast, they also talked about MK Ultra, all the different various potential governmental programs that were running to define or figure out how to have an edge in terms of making people change their mind. And that was obviously in the context of several wars, and also in the context of international espionage and all these types of things, right? So governments were quite keen to understand how to manipulate people's minds. So the person that was on that podcast uses those techniques to achieve good, right? So you can apply these techniques once you understand them to benefit people. People come to you as clients, and you apply those techniques to help them solve particular problems that they may have with their minds. And so it's not necessarily for the bad. It's when people give you consent to modify whatever they would like to have modified, well, then you can apply those techniques to help people get out of little mine holes where they dug themselves in, and get them out of there, or also help them solve a problem that they have. And so what struck me based on my own perspective on the mind, and what my own research internal research highlighted in my life. What struck me is, well, they're only talking about external influences on the mind. So using suggestivity as seen from the outside, from another person, and influencing you, for instance. Whereas the unsaid in that, and that just merely because it wasn't a topic of discussion, but is, well, you're doing that to yourself every second of the day. This, I'm talking about auto suggestivity, the mind modifying itself. And that's what also my part of my book was talking about, or is talking about. The fact that, again, as what we've discussed beforehand, for good or for bad, you're suggestive to your own mind, to your own thoughts. And it's first and foremost important to acknowledge that, because otherwise, if you don't acknowledge anything as something that's working, or a particular mechanism, you're not gonna either use it, or you're just gonna put it to the side and assume that it's not working, or it's not present, it's not existent. But it is existent. We are all very we are very conditioned by ourselves and also by the external environment, but mostly by ourselves. So we're conditioned by our likes and our dislikes. We fall prey to what we see, what we hear, what we smell, and that triggers particular reactions, particular emotions in us. And most of it we are potentially not even aware of. I think it's worthwhile mentioning that, well, humans are objects of classical conditioning, as it's called, as much as any animal. Classical conditioning was first coined by a physiologist who was working on dogs, Pavlov, who was doing experiments. I think, if I'm not wrong, so Pavlov was working on salivation in dogs, right? And so I think he wanted to just take the saliva, I don't know, analyze a few things in it, and so he looked for ways to get more saliva out of the dogs. And of course you can induce salivation if you just show them food. But interestingly, and that's where the experiments around conditioning came through, so he combined one stimulus, showing of the food, with another stimulus, for instance, clicking of a button, or whatever it is, just like an auditory or a sign. And when you combine these two for a while, so food and click always comes together, at some stage they're gonna salivate just by clicking. Just remove the food. So originally food was making them salivate, but because you paired it with a second stimulus, at some stage they don't make the distinction anymore. So click, salivation. And that's classical conditioning. And we fall prey to that same mechanism. We are conditioned, and we self-condition ourselves to these types of things. And you know, and maybe what I'd like also to say is, because I'm an immunologist, so I'm really fascinated by the immune system. And recently there was a scientific paper that came through, done on animals, but it's fair to assume that it might also apply to humans as well. So for instance, like where there's a lot of people that suffer from chronic inflammatory diseases, like the skin gets inflamed, or you have flare-ups of various things, especially when you're stressed. And how do those two things go together? And mechanistically, that paper really nicely delineated a mechanism whereby the first time you have that type of inflammation, there might have been something really that you reacted against. Let's assume you have chronic flare-ups on your skin, whether it's allergic or non-allergic, just have chronic flare-ups. The first one of these flare-ups might have occurred based on you touching a particular thing that was actually noxious to your body. So the initial reaction, was actually there was a reason for it. Now, when that first reaction or first few reactions, it's not entirely well established how many times you have to have that. But when that reaction occurred, there was also a nervous consequence. Like the nervous system was also activated, although you may have not perceived it as such. Like the immune system and the nervous system interact with each other in any kind of tissue or environment in the body. So there was this crosstalk already between the immune system and the nervous system. And, well, very similar to that classical conditioning, that's why I'm mentioning it, at some stage, and that's what was proven in that paper, if you just stimulate the nerve endings in that region, you induce the immune reaction in the absence of anything noxious or dangerous to you. So although the first few times, or the first time that occurred, you were actually immunologically reacting to something that was there, after a while you can remove actually that stimulus and replace it by just activating the nerves. So you could imagine that we just run by subconscious patterns where it's not subconscious, but where stress or any kind of nervous stimuli might, to some extent, reflect something that happened in the past that was associated with an immune reaction. And that then afterwards contributes to the chronicity of your issue without any other thing. Like the doctor can ask you 100 times, oh, did you touch something, or what happened, or did you change your bedding, or did you buy something new, or something like that? No, it's just because you chronically reactivate that nerve pattern that happened in the past paired with an immune reaction, and that contributes to the chronicity of your inflammatory condition. So this is, to me, that's almost one-on-one classical conditioning, only with the nervous system and the immune system. And so if that's the case, can you imagine what else is running like that? Can you imagine, like, based on your chronic thought patterns associated with particular emotions, associated with particular release of neurotransmitters, hormones, you are in full control of everything that's happening. But because you are in reactive mode based on your environment, you are self-perpetuating this kind of conditioning that at some stage might have had an external trigger, but then you, only by yourself, you perpetuate that thing. You perpetuate the conditioning, you perpetuate everything that's happening to you. And so that's a powerful thing to acknowledge, right? That's, no one's, as in that podcast, no one's hypnotizing you, no one's giving you psychoactive drugs, no one's doing experiments on you. It's you Of course, you're reacting to an external environment based on your thoughts and everything like that, but nothing external directly impacts you. It's everything through your thoughts, through your emotions that are associated with those thoughts, those beliefs. That has a biological consequence, and you're self-perpetuating all of that. And that's why understanding the mind, understanding just being able to zoom out of that and utilizing the higher mind or a higher level consciousness to just observe, okay, what's happening here? Are my thoughts just running amok, and triggering all that incessant release of neurochemicals, hormones? Can I actually be in charge of that and regain control, take my power back, and rewire that biology? So based on the fact, if these kind of patterns have run for years, if not decades, you will have to actively rewire all of that stuff, because that just runs on automatic thought. Like this just, it's self-perpetuating. You're not aware potentially that you're actually doing that. So you will have to actively choose to, first of all, acknowledge that this may be happening, and then do something about it. And that's where we're going also in the beneficial aspect of such mechanisms, where you, if you take charge, can take a large control of your body, of your health. And this is very much related to all of Joe Dispenza's work. His book, You Are the Placebo. Placebo effect is nothing else than that. I've done medical research now. It's mostly in my past, but I'm still actively involved in a lot of work. Biomedical research, if you do clinical studies, the golden standard is placebo-controlled randomized trials. And they have to be placebo-controlled because, why is the golden standard a placebo-controlled trial? Well, basically because everyone agrees that the placebo effect is real, otherwise you wouldn't have to control for it. It's the most logical thing in the world. So it is fair to say that the placebo effect is potentially one of the most indirectly researched thing in the world, because of all these studies that have a placebo control. So the placebo effect is being monitored on a daily basis all around the world in those trials. Of course, one of the arms has an active drug or ingredient that's being tested, but there's still a placebo arm. And all of that data is captured, but it's never maximized, or it's never they never try to understand it. They're actually quite annoyed by the placebo effect, right? I wish in that arm nothing would move, so that if there's a little bit of a move on my active arm, then I have a better chance to have a significant outcome. But the placebo effect is real, because it has to be controlled for in the high-end clinical studies. Otherwise, no one would have to control for it. And so the placebo effect is real. You go into a trial, whatever, hopefully you guys don't have cancer, but you have cancer or you have any other disease, you go into a trial, you try to figure out if something works or not. You encounter a person with a white coat, with a doctor title. They give you a pill. You don't know whether it's placebo, whether you have the active ingredient. But maybe you might, maybe I've got the active thing. Maybe I have that new drug that no one else is aware of. Maybe I have that super powerful, awesome drug that's going to cure everything. And just the fact that you're thinking about that, there would be a bit of hope. There would be a bit of, you pay more attention to your body. Do I feel different? Like, let's see how I react to that. Oh man, maybe, where are my lesions at? Like, how do I feel? How do I move? How do I move better? And this is auto-suggestivity. You're auto suggesting to yourself, oh, maybe there might be something good happening. And then suddenly something good happens. In the placebo arm, usually you have a response. It can be bigger or smaller than the other one. Again, no one's trying to maximize or optimize the placebo, right? So no one's going to tell you, oh, you feel better, right? Right? So no one's trying to really, because that's not how the clinical studies are run, you know. First of all, the clinician would be double blind, so the clinician doesn't know either what it's going to give you. So they don't know, you don't know. So that's why it's double blind. So no one's actually trying to harness that. If you try to harness it, probably you could get really very big placebo responses, which you still get. And so you are yourself driving that response. Isn't that amazing? Based on nothing. You didn't get anything. You might get a little sugar pill or whatever is in that pill. Nothing active. But you induced the response. So, I mean, this is fairly powerful. So those mechanisms that are running, autosuggestivity, can be both harmful, but it can be enormously beneficial. And my point is that you can take steps right now to take charge of that mechanism. And that mechanism, taken widely, affects your entire body. So that mechanism is mechanisms. It's an umbrella for you can take control of most of what's happening in your body. Of course, there's nutrition, there's other aspects to that, but just the mere fact of where you are at mentally, where your mind's at. Are you in control of that, or do you just like thoughts emerge, trigger emotions, mostly bad ones? You know, talking about the future, anxious, fear, thinking back about the past, getting angry. This has all a biological signature that eventually reflects into a reaction that may or may not involve the immune system. I'm not saying it's always the immune system, right? But these things travel systemically. We talk systemically, meaning throughout the entire body. Your entire body is innervated, so nerve endings go everywhere. That's why sometimes in meditations or in particular practices, they tell you, oh, focus on that area. Now, we both know, if I'm asking you, focus on your forearm and try to see, does it feel warm? Does it feel cold? Is it itchy? Does it feel good? You can actively focus on an area on your body. You can do that, right? But if I wouldn't tell you to do it, you wouldn't do it. So you can take the reins of everything. You can take the reins of where am I focusing my attention right now. And as it's being said in those kind of more esoteric fields, not just hardcore science, where your energy goes, that's where energy also flows, you know, like where attention goes, that's where energy flows. So where you put your attention has a physiological response. And I would say that's a very powerful thing. Now, of course, you might tell me, well, perfectly happy, I don't have a problem, I don't have diseases, so why would I do that? And that's a fair response, you know. I'm probably mostly addressing people where that mechanism might be helpful, you know, might solve a few things. But even that, and even if you don't have a problem, you know, just in terms of prevention, just being most of the time in a calm, present, loving state. Just in terms of longevity, you know, not triggering constant, slight inflammatory responses everywhere in the body that is known to, well, fasten aging. Just being able to just prevent everything bad from happening. Instead of having to cure something. Once you have to cure something, of course, it's going to be a bit harder, but even right now, if you're healthy, you don't have problems, you want to prevent any problems to come your way. And the best way to do that is to be in charge. You're the person in charge. Don't be run by your thoughts. Don't be run by your mind. I mentioned it beforehand, or just quoting someone, that the mind can be a bully. It just bullies you around. And then suddenly you end up with, oh yeah, well, 5 years later or 10 years later, suddenly you have an issue here, you have an issue there, whatever it may be. And it can surface in any kind of system. You know, it can visualize itself as later on cancer or cardiovascular disease or things like that. I'm not saying that there's no external circumstances. I'm a scientist. I'm well aware of external circumstances. But I'm saying that you cannot neglect that link between the mind and the body anymore. And it can be a major helper or contributor to health or disease. You choose. You're in charge. But are you in charge? That's my question. And I also fall prey to external stimuli that take me away from the driver's seat. Exciting stuff happening, phone buzzing, email dinging, all of that triggers boom, 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 reward systems and addictions and conditioning. You know, your phone is probably your first conditioner. Whenever it dings, probably like there's a slight release, boom, neurotransmitter release, boom, neurotransmitter release. That's conditioning. And when it doesn't go off, you're devoid of that response. So are you feeling more lonely, depressed? Has all an impact on your body. So acknowledge that it exists. You are being conditioned by external circumstances, perhaps initially. Then you self-perpetuate all these different mechanisms. Are you aware of these things? If you go deep within you, you know, you actually realize the triggers that impact you. You will know if you really pay attention. Can you work on those? Can you rewire those patterns, thereby rewiring your biology, rewiring your health? It's not too late once you have an issue, but ideally you would take charge to have long-term health, to never become sick. I'm not sure when the last time I went to the doctor. I probably went once. I think I went maybe once while in 15 years when I was in New Zealand. I didn't need a doctor. It was always healthy. Maybe every once in a while I catch a cold, it's done within 2 days, boom, gone. And I don't try to shy away from medications. Like even if you have that cold, it's interesting. When you have a cold or when you have anything, just like an infection somewhere or anything, I do that. I pay attention to that area. Because this has a biological effect. You pay attention to it, that is going to biologically activate secretion of neurotransmitters in that area. You activate that direct link to that area, and that will have biological consequences. So any type of immune cells that are there are going to get some signals. And I'm trying to do it intuitively. No one's giving you, oh yeah, you need to think those thoughts and then think about that place and then it does X, Y, and Z. We don't know what it does, how it's being done, but just focusing on it instead of trying to think it away, I don't want to be sick. I don't. So you basically, most of the time, you would shy away. You try to think about anything else than the affected area. You're trying to watch TV, change your thoughts. Oh, I hope it's gonna go soon. No, go in. Yes, it's still gonna suck, especially if you focus on it, but it may go away faster. You might actually, fasten healing. It's worth a try. So that. Those links are fascinating. They're understudied or not studied at all. I mean, in animals now, you start to have those mechanistic insights that come through. But it has to be shown in humans. And my assumption is there's not going to be a whole lot of research in that, to be honest, because where would the money come from? There's no money to be made. Where's the money at? There's no drug to sell, no intellectual property, where you might develop a particular technique and teach it to people, or you might become a healer, or you might help people based on what you figure out, help people how to deal with similar types of ailments that you might have had. But there's no real big money. There's no investors are going to pay you to figure these things out. And I'm a scientist, I love figuring out new methods of treatments. I love figuring out how you add the molecule here and then suddenly it triggers X, Y, and Z. That's fascinating. But that at the end of the day, you do not want to rely on any pharmacological intervention. You want to be self-sufficient, to be healthy. You want to be healthy most of the time, ill the least amount of time, and you don't want to rely on anything outside to make you feel better. You want to mostly rely on yourself. So you may want to train that. And it takes time, it takes effort. It's not, most people just want a pill and not thinking about it. Either these, or is there a pill for that? I don't want to change my habits. I don't want to change how I think, what my beliefs are. I don't want to change anything. I just want you to give me a bloody pill and now I'm going home. That's what people want. I don't want to change my diet. I don't want to change anything. And that's how the world runs, mostly. But I feel that you may have a different opinion on that, and so I invite you to explore that. You can be in charge if you want to. You can take charge, but it takes willingness, it takes effort. But the biology is there. This is not woo-woo anymore. This shouldn't be woo-woo anymore. It's being mislabeled as woo by people who want to make money or billions of dollars based on pharmacological interventions. But it's not woo. They just want to detract you from that because they don't make money of you anymore. Imagine if you're self-sufficiently healthy. No one's making money of you. That's a tragedy. But you can save money, and you can save your health, and you can save your joy, and it's all gonna work in your favor. So, if you have a second, think about it. Suggestivity, auto-suggestivity. That Chase Hughes guy, he also said, the beginning of the Joe Rogan Experience, he said, your mind doesn't have a firewall. And again, he was talking about external things. There's no firewall. But there's no, it wouldn't be a firewall, but there's nothing internal either. Nothing prevents you to just be on auto loops, self-constant auto loops, without any external hypnotist or anything like that. There's no mechanism or sensor that tells you, hey, snap out of it. There's no mechanism like that. You can run your entire life like that. on autopilot, like self-perpetuating, like, oh shit, I feel shit, I feel shit, oh, I'm constantly sick, oh, this is not working, my entire life is a disaster. Nothing's gonna, no ring's gonna, no bell's gonna ring, nothing's gonna happen. There's no alarm bells. The alarm bells might come through voices like mine, say, hey, snap out of it if you're lucky enough to see those kind of things. I'm like, you might then suddenly self-reflect, oh, hang on. And then suddenly you can flip the switch. But you need to take control, you need to take charge. No one else will do it for you. I mean, your mind will and go on autopilot, and your mind will run your life, but not in a way that you perhaps wish that it runs your life. The mind is very powerful, but you need to take charge of it. Much love, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.